Wir sind nicht allein. Die Phase der Rückkehr der Götter steht kurz bevor.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen auf meinem YouTube-Kanal. Wir sind nicht allein. Abonnieren Sie den Kanal, aktivieren Sie die Glocke und verpassen Sie keine neuen Videos über Erich von Däniken, die Paläozetie, Präastronautik, Mysterien und ungelöste Rätsel der Geschichte. Folgen Sie mir auf Facebook und Instagram. Denn wir sind nicht allein.
All right, I have a great honor to introduce our next speaker. Every science has its innovators, its celebrities, its giants. Ufology is no different. Our next speaker broke the ground for ancient astronaut research, and I mean that literally. He was the first, the innovator. In 1968, while he was a managing director of a five-star Swiss hotel, he wrote his first book on the subject, and many of us read it. All right, for you old timers. How many of you was this the very first book you read on this subject of any kind? It blows my mind because that was it for me. This started my whole collection, okay? All right, Chariots of the Gods, which had become an immediate bestseller in the United States and Germany and later in 38 other countries. Of the more than 3,000 lectures which our keynote speaker has delivered in 25 countries, over 500 of them have been presented in universities. Now, I want you to understand the significance of this. This is a crazy topic. Back in the day, it raised questions that had never been raised before. And universities invited him to come and talk, and they still do. The first time that I met Eric was in 1977 in Chicago, Illinois Institute of Technology. I was going to school as a physics major. This is a school of high technical learning. It is the gigantic nerd school, okay? And they had Eric come there and give a lecture, and I was thrilled to meet him, and I think we got in an argument out in the lobby. I don't remember. Yeah. You wouldn't remember me. I was 100 pounds lighter, and I was 18 years old, so I didn't know. And I had, oh yes, and I had hair. It's true, I've got pictures. All right, he's fluent in 4 languages. He is an avid researcher and compulsive traveler, logging over 100,000 miles of travel a year to remote places all over the planet where he firsthand gathers the information that he needs to examine and research this topic. He's not an armchair researcher, in other words, okay? For his groundbreaking work to further the understanding of mankind, he was awarded an honorary doctorate degree by the University of Bolivia. In 1998, he founded the Archaeology, Astronautics, and SETI Research Association, or the AASRA, which publishes the English journal Legendary Times, reporting about the latest research in the Paleo-SETI field. I like the way that sounds, Paleo-SETI, that's cool. Since it began airing in 2010, he has contributed to the Ancient Aliens show, which wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for you, for God's sakes. The most successful documentary series ever aired on the History Channel. 7 seasons, 100 episodes, still going strong. He has over 200,000 pictures of every mysterious place he has visited in his archives. So don't go to his house and say, hey, can I see the family album? You're going to be there a while. He's published 39 books concerning the visit of ETs in the deep past of mankind, and he makes it absolutely clear this planet was visited by ETs in the past. Our Stone Age ancestors looked at these visitors as the gods, which created the original mythologies and religions. He is the shoulder upon which all other ancient alien researchers must stand. Please join me in welcoming Erich von Däniken.
Thank you. You are a professional. So, jetzt hoffe ich, yes, Maria, dass das alles riesig liegt. Ich hoffe, die Blätter sind in richtiger Reihenfolge. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not an extraterrestrial, I'm from Switzerland. And this man next to me here is my secretary. His name is Ramon. He works for me since more than 10 years. I was prepared to have 2 speeches here in these Ozark Mountains. And this is the second speech. But this audience is completely different than the ones on the first speech. They are probably 100 persons who were at the first speech. That's the second speech. That's why I asked you for my permission. I will bring a few repetitions out of the first speech because you need it. Okay. So, I start with the Bible because every one of you can control it. Everyone has a Bible at home. And there at the end of the Bible, there is a story of a prophet with the name of Ezekiel. One has to know in advance, Ezekiel, by profession, he was a high priest at the Temple of Jerusalem. All this took place roughly 3,000 years from now. And in his time, Jerusalem was captured by the Babylonians. The high society of the Jewish community, and Ezekiel belonged to the high society as a high priest, was captured, and they were brought as slaves to a place where there was a river. The river was called Chebar, the river of Chebar. So Ezekiel was there with many others, and of a sudden something happened. Here, he and the other slaves hear a noise up there in the clouds, and they all look up there. Now I first show you 5 pictures out of an old Bible, 150 years old, just to give you an impression what our forefathers had in mind when they read Ezekiel. And then I explain you with what meanings and what professionals we made the new modern interpretation. And finally, you will see a computer animation concerning Ezekiel, a computer animation that was just buffing. You will realize it. So he's there with the other slaves on the river of Chebar, and they hear a noise. They all look up there. They see an object which is coming down. They have no idea what the object is. Do not forget, at that time, there were no words for technology. Ezekiel could never say a spaceship lands or a space shuttle. He has no idea what it is. Now he himself, by professional, is a high priest, so he believes, of course, it must be God, the Almighty God. So all of them fell on the ground, including Ezekiel. He, as a high priest, he feels it's up to me to say grace and thank you to the Lord. And as the first one, he stands up. And he describes this whole thing here as the splendorness of the highest. By the way, I know the original Ezekiel in the Hebrew language. And in the Hebrew language, in the whole Ezekiel text, the word God never appears. When I read my German translation or your English translation, you read the highest or a splendorness of God. But in the original, the word God never appears. So he says, the splendorness of the highest. Ezekiel stands on his feet, and he starts to describe what it is. And he realizes that this is not God. The whole thing here is the splendorness of the highest. The whole thing. Then he writes, just on top of it, there was something glittering all around, and in the center was something like a throne. And of this, what looked like a throne, somewhere was sitting in glittering clothes, looking like a human. Under this throne, he sees 4 living creatures. And he realizes these creatures have all wings. And when the wings moved, they made a terrible noise. Under the wings, he realized that there are wheels. And now he is completely shocked. Wheels of his time can go forward and backward. But the wheels which he sees here, they can not only go forward and backward, at the same time, they go right and left. So you have a wheel which goes forward, backward, right and left, and all without a steering movement. When you're sitting on your car and you drive, and you turn your wheel. Your wheels turn so. It's a steering movement. Ezekiel's wheel goes in any direction without ever making a movement. This confuses him completely. He writes 4 times about this wheel. Under the wheel, he realized there were legs, and he clearly says the legs were striped and sparkling like metal. In his time, there were metal. 30 years ago, roughly, I had a secret speech. Secret because we all made an agreement that nobody goes to public. A secret speech at the highest level at NASA, here, U Space Agency. And on this secret speech, I was also speaking about Ezekiel. And later we had a dinner together, and the chief of the construction section, an ex-German, his name was Joe Blumrich, came to me and said, Mr. von Däniken, that was very interesting. But in the Bible, you will never find technology. In the Bible, these are visions, these are dreams, these are all kinds of things, but certainly not technology. And he said, anyhow, he was grateful. I was the first one who brought him up to Ezekiel. He never read Ezekiel in the Bible. So that's what he wants to do now. And he started to read Ezekiel. And phrase by phrase, he was more fascinated. This was before the moon landing. And they said, before the moon landing, and they said, what Ezekiel is doing here, we can reconstruct with our methods, with our meanings. Then a few other scientists from NASA came to the office of Joe Blumrich and said, what are you doing with the Bible here? They said, look at Ezekiel, this is incredible. We can reconstruct what he did, phrase by phrase. Nothing was left behind it. And finally, they wanted to find out what was this thing, what he said, the splendorness of the highest, the wheels which can go in every direction, the wings, the noise, what was this all? And this here was the outcome of it. Now, this is not a spaceship with which you could move from star to star. We would call this today a space shuttle. In orbit, there must be a mother spaceship. And from the mother spaceship in orbit, this small vehicle comes down. Ezekiel describes the whole thing as the splendorness of the highest. He has no idea of technology. On top, he says there was something glittering, and inside was something like a throne, and on the throne was somebody sitting in glittering clothes looking like a human. It was simply the pilot in his astronaut clothes. Then he sees 4 living creatures with wings. Where are there 4 living creatures? Is there any living creatures? At Ezekiel's time, there was no technology. He did not have a word of a motor. He has nothing technological. If something moves by itself, it's like living. It lives, it's moving, it's making movement. So for him, the wings are living creatures. And there's no doubt that he describes this, because he describes when the wings turned by itself, a terrible noise appeared. He compares the noise with the thundering of a waterfall. Must be very, very noisy. And the sand were blowing up. He says when the wind was came to a standstill, the wings looked down or were hanging down. He continues, soon as the wings start to rotate again, the noise started again. The sand was blown up again. When the wings lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up too. Of course, when a helicopter lifts up, the wheels do not stay on the ground, which is all normal. So, the wheel. Ezekiel was describing a wheel which can go forward and backward without any steering movement. At NASA, they reconstructed the wheel. They separated the wheel from the central axis in different little segments. Each segment has an own axis. It's easy to understand. Look, with this wheel, you can go forward and backward. If this wheel should rotate into your direction, simply the lower axis would turn into your direction. Or on the opposite. With this construction, you can move in every direction without having a steering movement. By the way, NASA has received the patent of this wheel, international patent. So if here maybe you are descendants of the prophet Ezekiel, you should ask for money. Then including the wheels who was tried, and every detail was reconstructed. There is a book on the market, I do not know if you still receive it in the United States. It's called The Spaceship of Ezekiel by Joe Blumrich. And there you can read every detail. I have no time to go into every detail. When you read Ezekiel next weekend, you will realize he describes all this splendorness of the highest from chapter 1 to chapter 39. And in chapter 40, something different happens. He says, the splendorness of the highest came again. So this space shuttle arrived a second time. This time, the hand of the Lord picked me up, Ezekiel, and put him on one of the thrones. In my idea, he's sitting now on the seat of the co-pilot. Then they have a lift up. It must have been a hard lift up, because he says, and the hand of the Lord pressed upon my chest. Gravity force. Of course, he hears the noise of the wings and all this, but he does not know where they go. He clearly describes, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. Now that's important. In the Bible, he does not say they brought me on a mountain, or they brought me on a high mountain. They brought me on a very, very high mountain. He flies over there, and then he sees something like a little village. And in the center of it is something like a temple. In the Hebrew original, he never says it is a temple. He says, like a temple. Now we have to ask ourselves, what was a temple? 3,000 years ago, a building of the gods, for the gods. Later we made our temple a holy place to pray and to sing, to adore God. In the beginning, a temple was a place for the gods. He's sitting in there, and this object, this splendorness of the highest, comes to a standstill directly over this building, over the so-called temple. And slowly, slowly, it sinks into the building. Then it becomes quiet, the noise stops, and he can step out of it. And there is a man coming in glittering clothes again, and to say hello, he says to Ezekiel, hey, human, you humans, you have eyes to see, but you see nothing. You have ears to hear, but you hear nothing. And then the stranger gives Ezekiel a measuring device and orders him to measure the so-called temple. And Ezekiel says, why? Why should I measure this building? Why? And the other one in the glittering clothes says, that's the reason why we brought you here. So they brought him here to measure this building. So Ezekiel starts to measure length and large and doors and steps and everything. Read it in the Bible. 4 pages in the Bible are just measuring, nothing else. There is a German engineer, his name is Hans-Herbert Bayer, and he just stumbled over these measurings. NASA had just reconstructed the splendorness of the highest. The German engineer with his team simply was interested, what about these measurements? Is this really a building, or is it just fantasy, imagination? So he took all the measurements, word by word, figure by figure, and reconstructed the building, which Ezekiel described. One day, I had a yellow envelope on my desk, and in there, technical drawings, about 20, and the letter of a man, which I didn't know before, Hans-Herbert Bayer, and he said he was reconstructing the building. I was absolutely enthusiastic. I phoned him and we came together, and I said, Mr. Bayer, do you know what NASA has done? I had no idea. What has NASA done with Ezekiel? I said, NASA just reconstructed the vehicle, the splendorness of the higher, and you just reconstructed the so-called temple. So I brought the NASA people together with the German engineers, and both fit perfectly together. The so-called temple was simply the base, the earth base, for the extraterrestrial space shuttle. You know, for repair, for fill up and these things. It fits centimeter by centimeter in it. Now we have a few questions first concerning theology. I myself, I was educated as a Catholic in Switzerland. And I was for 6 years in a Catholic boarding school led by Jesuits. We had to make translations of the Bible, German to Latin, Latin to Greek. I know very well what I'm speaking about. I know that the theologians, they see all this situation completely different than I look at it. The theologians say, Ezekiel had a vision. He saw the Lord, the Almighty God, sitting on his throne and traveling around. Well, I am still a very deep believer in God. I am one of these figures who pray every evening. But which God? You know my ideas. This planet was visited thousands of years ago by extraterrestrials. Our forefathers were Stone Age people at that time. They had no idea of technology. They believed erroneously that these extraterrestrials are gods. There are no gods. We all know that. There's only one God, the creator of the universe, but no gods. And it was all a misunderstanding from the beginning here in the translations. Now, in my belief, when I was a boy, God, the Almighty God, had to have some qualities. For example, God would never make a mistake. Or God, the real God, spiritual being, would never use a vehicle in which to move from point A to point B. God is all over, omnipotent. Or God is, of course, out of time. God does not make an experience and then he has to wait what the result is. He knows it in advance. Otherwise, he's not God. So in my idea, when the theologians told me in school, in high school, it was just a vision. Ezekiel saw God on his throne, on his chariot, flying around. I said, come on, my God doesn't need a chariot to fly from point 1 to point B. A chariot who makes noise compared to the thundering of a waterfall. That's something wrong. I believe in a spiritual God. Then, in the Bible, by the way, in the German and in the English Bible, I control this, there are funny things in translation. Ezekiel said, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. In the English and German Bible, you can read, they brought me to Jerusalem. The word Jerusalem never appears in the original Ezekiel text. And in Jerusalem, there is no high mountain. Of course, not the very, very high mountain. He was something in a complete different place. Ezekiel describes that on one side, on one angle of the temple, he saw a little river. And when he was on the air, the river grown up to a big river. And then always in direction of the north. Then he made a curve in direction of the east. In the German and English Bible, you read, well, this was the Temple river who finally flew into the Mediterranean Sea. This is all not correct with the original Ezekiel. There is no word of Mediterranean Sea. They just put all these words inside. Now, Ezekiel described the temple, the measurements of the temple. In theology, they believe that Ezekiel received a vision of the future temple in the future Jerusalem. That's why the whole text in your Bible is translated in the future, grammatical form of the future. When I say, I am, I see this light, so this is presence. When I say, I will see this light, it's future. Because the theologians believe Ezekiel had a vision of a future temple in a future Jerusalem. The whole text is translated in the future. When you read the Bible, you will read, for example, the temple will be, for example, 220 meters long. The temple will be 160 meters large. Will be means future. The original Ezekiel does not speak in the future. The temple is so long, is so large, etc. So you really have to understand the original text to come clear with all this, which was made a mess up here. By the way, these theologians who made all these translations, they were all fair and high intelligent personalities. Nobody wanted to make a conspiracy, not at all. But in their time, they had no other meanings. They said we must see it in a theological, psychological way. In the meantime, we see it differently. Now, I'd like to show you how, in our opinion, what really happened with Ezekiel some thousands of years ago. They were on earth as slaves, feels the gravity by the start. He says, the hand of the Lord pressed upon my chest. He don't know where they go. He says, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. And he saw beneath him something. Why? Why, for heaven's sake, have they done this? Just imagine the situation. Thousands of years in the past, humans have no idea of technology. There is a group of humans, slaves on this river in Babylonia. Now, something came, they believe it has to do with God. Ezekiel, the extraterrestrials know immediately which one is the leader of the group. Ezekiel is taken away. Today we would say he was abducted. They bring him to their camp, to their basic camp in the high mountain. They order him to measure the basic camp. Then they bring him back to his own people. And what happened? His own people, they all believe it was God, the Almighty God, who took our high priest, Ezekiel, and now they brought our high priest back. So the others will stand around Ezekiel and say, Ezekiel, our brother, you are back again. How do you feel? What have they done to you? Have they hurt you? Are you hungry, thirsty? But Ezekiel is very happy. He describes his flight to a very, very high mountain. And he said, up there was a building. I had to measure it. Here are the measuring dates, the exact dates. Because his society believed it has to do with the Almighty, the real God. And they took his high priest up. Such a text, such a dates, measuring dates, will never end into the litter, in the garbage. It's too important, it has to do with God. So it enters into the holy writings of mankind. And that's what they wanted. They knew exactly the holy writings of mankind will never be destroyed. Men may have war, they may fight against each other, but the holy writings are holy for all the people, all over. So these holy writings will survive. And they knew exactly that some thousands of years in the future, the generation, our generation, we are still believers in God, but we are critical and we can realize, stop. He speaks about wheels going in X direction, about wings which make noise. He speaks about legs that were metallic. We will realize this was nothing spiritual. This was something technological. And now we start to ask questions because of the old texts. That's what they wanted. And we are exactly in the situation. Now we ask questions. What happened? Some people may suggest, well, did we have maybe an earlier high civilization on Earth? The story of Atlantis or Lemuria or whatever. And other stupid people like me may start the question, has it maybe to do with extraterrestrials? And then comes automatically the next answer, well, if it has to do with extraterrestrials, where is the proof? I mean, extraterrestrials just don't disappear like this with nothing. They must have left something somewhere. And that's the situation we have today. Because of Ezekiel's text, and of course not only of Ezekiel's text, there are many other texts I'm familiar with, we have to start the question, where is the proof? What kind of proof? I always think these extraterrestrials, they behave themselves maybe like ethnologists of today. They studied a few tribes, they learned a few language, they gave a few advice, they disappeared with the promise to return. But they knew, of course, that evolution would create technology in a far future. Now they left a proof. What proof? I could imagine something I call a time capsule, something which is written in there, for example, we came from such and such solar system with that and that technology. We found this on this planet, that and that generation. We helped a little, we leave now, we will come back again. So it's a form of writing maybe, the time capsule. But every type of writing throughout thousands of years will be destroyed. You could put this form of writing in a capsule and put it in a great temple. But now in the next 2,000 years, some idiot or dictatorship would destroy the temple. He doesn't like the religion. And the time capsule has gone. Or you put it in a pyramid and somebody destroyed the pyramid. Or you put it somewhere on a place, on a logical place, and then a tsunami comes, or an earthquake, or whatever. And the message is gone. But it's a message for our generation. Time capsule, what are they doing with it? That's the situation, the questions we have. Under what logical, mathematical signs should we look for a time capsule? That's a question for the science. But you only come to the question when you have a reason for it. Without Ezekiel's text, we would not have a reason to look for a time capsule. Since the Americans and the Russians are sending satellites up there, the near space is absolutely observed. We know exactly what's surrounding our planet. And there are 3 objects up there which were already there before the first satellite was sent up there. Now in science, you always look for the nearest simple and reasonable explanation. So the next nearest and reasonable explanation was, these objects up there must be some pieces of an exploded meteorite. So it's natural explanation. And you can calculate the orbit, and you know they will never fall into the earth. They will not harm us. But in the meantime, thanks to Ezekiel and others, we have questioned, have extraterrestrials left a time capsule under some circumstances where it could not be destroyed? No tsunami, no earthquake, no ants, no dictator, nobody who can destroy it. And only the space generation is able to collect the time capsule. All the other generations don't have the technology. Now we have the question, and maybe now it's up to NASA. We know the orbit of these 3 objects, which we think they are simply meteorites. Maybe they are, maybe not. Now we could fly there and collect them. And maybe we find a time capsule, and we find the proof of extraterrestrials. But I am able to prove that extraterrestrials were here anyhow, without the time capsule. I was talking about God, and I was educated as Catholic, and they told me in school, when you live as a brave man, when you do not hurt somebody, when you do not lie, of course you do not kill, you live your life correctly, and when you die, you will go to heaven. And heaven is the place of absolute happiness. In heaven we are together with the Almighty God. Everyone is happy. And then, when I became a little older, I learned that heaven is a place of war. All the big mythologies, for example, you know the god Apollo. Apollo was the son of Zeus. But before Zeus arrived in our solar system, he had to fight in heaven against Kronos. In our Christian Jewish tradition, we learn that in the beginning in heaven there was an archangel with the name of Lucifer. Lucifer with his disciples one day came before the throne of the Almighty God and said, "We do not serve you anymore." And the Almighty God asked for the archangel Michael to chase out Lucifer and his disciple out of the heaven. If heaven would be the place of absolute happiness, as religious say, then there is no war there. If you are happy, there is no opposition. So we should change the word heaven into space. And all this happened for many, many other words which we find in the holy traditions. We have words like angel. What is an angel? Scientifically, an angel is a messenger. If you design an angel, he has wings. He has mostly helmet or halos around his head. But these angels were not the unschuldige. Who speaks perfectly German here now? Innocent. Yeah, these angels were not innocent. These angels fighted against humans, destroyed humans, and I will prove it later in this speak, that these angels had sex with humans. Spiritual beings from God, angels, have no sex with humans. We should change the word angel into extraterrestrial. What is an archangel? Well, the leader of a group of extraterrestrials. You just change about 10 words of the old holy writings with our today's modern meaning, and you change the whole content. It makes sense. And before, it makes no sense. For example, many of our humans have been brought into the heaven. For example, in the Hindu tradition, in the Mahabharata, a man called Arjuna was brought into the heaven. There he was taught, and they brought him back, happy and alive. Or we have the book of Enoch. Enoch was brought into the heaven. He was taught there, he learned a lot, and they brought him back to earth. We remember the biblical Elijah. He was brought into the heaven. He was going up to the heaven. Heaven in reality were space, and not heaven as a place of happiness. And strange things happen in heaven, in the so-called heaven. We have chiselings where one of the angels came down. By the way, you can read this in the second book of the King, in the Bible, chapter 19. You read that an angel of the Lord killed 185,000 Assyrians. Just like this. No war, no spear, no arrow, no sword, just 185,000 Assyrians. Second book of the Kings, chapter 19. What was that? What kind of an angel was this? And we find similar situations in other holy texts. There is a temple wall of Edfu. In Edfu, you always, in the whole Egypt, you find the winged sun disk. The sun has wings. And there is a temple inscription in Edfu where it says that the Pharaoh was in trouble because his city was surrounded by enemies. And the Pharaoh was always the one who has given gold to the god, to me, to extraterrestrials. They needed gold and jewelry. So now he was surrounded by enemies. And the Pharaoh asked his god in the winged sun disk for help. And the god in the sun disk came down so fast, so quick, that the enemies could not even see or hear him. Supersonic speed. And he killed them all, over 100,000, in just a few minutes. What kind of angels were that? War in heaven. The biblical Jacob is taken into heaven. A stair comes down from heaven. When you next time go to Thailand, Thailand has not only wonderful beaches or beautiful girls, and for the women, beautiful boys. They also have old tradition. Go to the old king's palace, which is open to the public. And in the garden of the king's palace, you find big pictures. And on these pictures, they celebrate, or they have designed parts of the Thailand mythology of the Thais. It's called the Ramayana. In pictures, one of the gods has a weapon. The weapon is called Gurkha. The Gurkha destroys everything and always comes back to the god. You see the pictures where they use race weapons. The head was just cut off of it. So this is mythology in form of pictures, not in form of written books. And this happened worldwide. Now, there are other methods to prove that we have been extraterrestrials. And it sounds in the beginning, what does this has to do with extraterrestrials? You will realize it very quick. In Egypt, everyone knows the Sphinx. The Sphinx which stands before the Great Pyramid. The Sphinx is a mixed creature. The head means the Pharaoh, they say, and the body is the body of a lion. But this Sphinx here, there were some centuries where the Sphinx was completely covered with sand. Even Herodotus, the Greek historian, who was there about 450 BC, he wrote about the pyramid, but not about the Sphinx. The Sphinx was not there. It was covered by sand. Now, in Egypt, there is not only one Sphinx. If you go up the Nile, on every temple in Egypt, you find sphinxes. And not only as you have seen before with the head of the Pharaoh and the body of the lion. There are completely different forms of sphinxes. Here we are in Luxor. And Luxor has different sphinxes, mixtures of different animals. mixed up between animals and humans. There were two temples in Luxor, the Luxor temple and the Karnak temple. Between them is a distance of 3.8 kilometers. In antiquity, there was a road, 3.8 kilometers, and right and left on the road, every 10 meters was one of the sphinxes. Now, what is a sphinx, or the sphinx? It's finally a mixed creature, something mixed. So we say that was all fantasy of our forefathers. But I can prove that this is not true. Some of these mixed creatures really did exist. By the way, they have nice faces here. Still today, you have hundreds of them. We are now in Saqqara. Saqqara, the step pyramid, they say it's the oldest pyramid in Egypt. I don't believe it, but it doesn't matter. And the tourists stand before this pyramid every day, thousands of tourists. And no one of the tourists knows that under the sand, under the desert here, are gigantic tunnels. Tunnels for kilometers. Left and right, there are niches. And in every niches are the greatest sarcophaguses which the humans have ever seen. This subterranean system was closed for tourists for about 9 years now. Since a few months, it's open again for tourists. At least one of these subterranean tunnels there. You see, it's large enough you can drive in by a tractor. And then you see these niches. And they hold the biggest sarcophaguses which you can imagine. The lower part measures about 80 to 100 tons a weight. And only the lid has 30 to 40 tons. Now watch the precision here, the cutting. This subterranean place is called the Serapheum. It's a mixture of two words. Look the precision here. Incredibly, the cutting. And all this is granite. The granite comes from Saqqara. The granite comes from Aswan. Aswan is 1,000 kilometers away from here. So, from the ancient writers, the historians, for example from Herodotus, Diodor, Strabon, etc., we know that the old Egyptians, they admired some of the mixed creature. One of these creatures was a bull. Was a bull. The bull's name was Apis. Apis was not an ordinary bull. Beside Apis, there were ordinary bulls, which are described. The ordinary bulls, they were eaten. But Apis was a bull of the gods. Apis had a star on his chest. He had a special sign on his mouth. What?
On his head.
On his head, yeah, on his head, of course. Etc. And it was an animal. Apis did not appear on earth by a sexual reunion, a sexual act. Apis was made by a ray or a beam of the gods. The humans could kill all the normal animals, the bulls, but never an Apis. Apis was holy, and Apis was dangerous. In literature it said Apis was so strong from time to time, Apis destroyed small temples. He trampled down old humans, old men, women, and some babies. But the humans were not allowed to do something to this holy animal. So we knew from the literature that a holy bull existed with the name of Apis. But never somebody found an Apis. We found all kinds of mummies, including mummies of normal bulls, but not mummies of an Apis. And then, about 150 years ago, a young French archaeologist was here in Saqqara, which you have just been, the step pyramid. And he wrote later, he was still a little drunken from the evening before. They had a lot of drinks together. And he fell on his ground, and while he stand up, he saw a little stone, and on the stone, the engraving Apis. At that time, they just learned how to translate the hieroglyphics. And August Mariette knew how to read hieroglyphics. So, Apis. He was electrified. He said, Apis? We never found an Apis mule. We know from the literature this holy animal existed, but we never found one. Are maybe Apises here? So August Mariette, he started to look for Apis. He did not work like an archaeologist would do today. Archaeologists very carefully, they with the brushes, and so they look and take the dust away. August Marius simply used dynamite. Put dynamite in the ground and bam, it names and so. And in one of these holes, he suddenly slipped down into a subterranean corridor. And when the sand was away and they give him torches down, he was standing before one of these gigantic sarcophaguses. And in view of these gigantic sarcophaguses, he was absolutely convinced, oh, hallelujah, I'm the first one. We found apices, bulls. These gigantic sarcophaguses can only contain apices. Otherwise, you would never make such a gigantic thing. So they put away the lid slowly. And August Marius wrote in his writings, when he first, with his head looked in there, he had the impression that his lungs are burning. He went back immediately. Then he took some towels with water and he went in again. All these gigantic sarcophagus, most of them, not all, were full with stinky bitumen. Bitumen is asphalt, you know, that's what we make the streets of it. In Egypt, you find natural asphalt lakes. So what was that? Gigantic sarcophaguses for asphalt? Of course, they took some of the asphalt pieces out. They brought it into the desert and they analyzed it. And in the asphalt were thousands and thousands of broken bones of different animals. Not one animal, but not one apis was found here. Now something is wrong. In old Egypt, they mummified everything. They mummified not only, for example, the pharaoh or the human bodies. They mummified dogs. They mummified crocodiles, salamanders, fishes. Only under Saqqara, on these tunnels, 200,000 mummified crocodiles exist. 200,000 in these tunnels. Also in Saqqara, 4 millions, you hear read correct, 4 millions of mummified birds, ibis birds, were found. Just imagine, are they crazy? 4 million animals you have to kill. Then you have to open the tomb. You have to take out all this ingredient, the liver and all this. You have to put oil in it. You have to put linen around it. You need 4 million of canopies. Canopies also such things here, which you put 4 million. What the hell there? Even scorpions, small animals, fishes, whatever was alive was mummified in ancient Egypt. Why? They were sure of a resurrection. They would be a reburning later, but only when the body is preserved. When the body does not exist, your soul or your consciousness cannot be reburned again, according to their knowledge. It would be absolutely a catastrophe to kill the body of an animal or the human, to destroy it. It could never be reburned again. But now, I just said, in these gigantic sarcophaguses, there were broken bones. This doesn't fit with Egypt's religion. Now in old religion, in old Egypt, we had different historians from the West, but also Egyptian historians. For example, Herodot was there, Strabon, Plutarch, Manetho was an Egyptian. And they all say, in Egypt at once, the gods were there. Herodot, the Greek historian, was there about 430 BC. He was in Thebes. Thebes is today's Luxor. And he clearly say in his second book of Histories, chapter 142, 141, he said, the priest in Thebes, in Luxor, showed him 241 statues, one next to the other. And the priest gave to every statue a short explanation. So this was living from then bis then, this priest was living from then bis then and then. And the high priest assured to Herodotus, these 241 statues are equivalent to 11,341 years. At that time, at 11,341 years, the gods from the sky were living among the humans. Since that time, the gods have not returned. Now, Herodotus made that statement 2,500 years from now. 11,341 years plus 2,500 from now means more or less 14,000 years ago. The gods were there. And then also, Herodotus say that the gods created mixed creatures. You remember the Sphinx? All the sphinges, these different creatures. Now the writings of Manetho. Manetho was an Egyptian priest and historian. They mostly are destroyed. But the father of the church, the Christian church, Eusebius, took over many pages of Manetho's old writing. And Eusebius gives pages of mixed creatures which existed in ancient time in Egypt. He says, bulls with the head of a human. Do you remember the Minotaurus from Greece? There were horses with the head of a human. You remember the centaurs? There were different animals which had the tail of a fish. There were dogs which were mixed with lions. All kind of mixed animals, and they say they did exist. Now, we have mixed creatures in Sumerian cylinder seals and Sumerian tablets. You see, these beings have wings. In the literature, they say there were humans with wings. In official archaeology, it is explained that these mixed creatures, they call them living genius. They are working on the tree of life. But when I look at this is not the tree of life. Do you know how DNA is composited? Of the 4 basics? Exactly like here. Again, mixed creatures are working on the tree of life. In reality, they simply change one of the amino acids. And they make mixed creatures. And you can prove it because these mixed creatures do exist in form of pictures and chiselings. This is in the British Museum in London. It's the obelisk of Salamazar II. You see, the elephant has a normal size compared to the human. But who is this thing here? It must have been alive. You see it closely here. It was living. It's not the human. It's not an ape. And the Babylonian writing below say, mixed creatures were captured and brought to the Pharaoh. This one is having one of his fingers in his mouth. They are held on chains. If they will not be alive, you don't need these chains. So mixed creatures did exist. And now we come back to this Seraphim, these sarcophaguses. Remember, they were all filled with bitumen, asphalt, and broken bones. Now imagine the sarcophaguses were made of granite, and the granite comes from Aswan. Aswan is 1,000 kilometers away from Saqqara. In practice, the ancient Egypt had to transport gigantic stone blocks 1,000 kilometers down the Nile to Saqqara. At that time, on the Nile, there were 3, wie heißt das schon wieder? Cataracts, Stromschnellen, cataracts. Today they have, whatever, you understand. So it was very, very complicated. Now the stone blocks came down to Saqqara. Somebody chisels it and polites it in that precision you have seen before. Absolutely flat, matte, gigantic. Another crew, other members of the crew are chiseling out tunnels under the ground of Saqqara. Right and left they make niches. Then they transport these gigantic sarcophaguses down into these tunnels and put it into the niches. It's quite a work, all this. And what for? For smashed bones? This is absolutely rubbish. Nonsense. Their religion forbid to smash bones. They should mummify every animal. And even if for a reason they would not respect this, they would kill an animal. So why at the hell do they need these sarcophaguses? And all this work, they could put it into the Nile, the crashed bones. I have an idea. These were mixed creatures. The gods, the so-called gods, the extraterrestrials, made mixed creatures. Why? An extraterrestrial crew is on a generation spaceship. They are on the way for hundreds of years. It's not coincidence that they found our planet. I explain this later why. They found that planet as expected. And they found humans, they help a little, they change a little, and they see different animals on this planet. The extraterrestrials see, for example, a lion. A lion is powerful, strong, with his muscles. Then they see, for example, a crocodile. They see the crocodile has obviously a skin which is heat resistant. It's lying on the sun. So they say, why don't we mix these creatures? The skin of the crocodile, heat resistant, with the muscles of the lions. Why? Out there in the universe, there are different planets, not only planets like ours. There might be planets which are closer to the sun. It's hotter than here. Planets which are a little far away, it's colder than here. Planets who are bigger, you have more gravity, you need more muscles to move. Planets who are a little slower, you make big moves with your muscles. So you need different forms of life on different planets. They make mixed creatures, they make experiences. And then they tell to the humans, these creatures are our creatures, creatures of the gods. You humans, do not kill them. We want to observe them. Don't eat them, etc. Now one day, the job of the gods, the so-called gods, was done. They disappeared again. But mixed creatures were still on Earth. The humans were afraid of them. Hey, we cannot kill them, we can do nothing. So they waited until this mixed creature died by itself, a natural death. After they were dead, they took their bones, crashed it together, put gigantic sarcophaguses from Aswan, put these crashed bones into the sarcophagus. To be sure, they put stinking asphalt on it, filled it with asphalt, to be sure exactly a gigantic lid with 30 to 40 tons. That was not mummies who should be resurrected, reborn again. It was the contrary. It was a sort of jail. They should never return again. Now, what has all this to do with extraterrestrials? Some thousands of years ago, in old Egypt, there were no genetical knowledge. No one knows something about genetical design. Now we can prove that there were mixed creatures because of the broken bones. They were together. A mixed creature will never appear in a normal evolution. Evolution never creates mixed creature. If a human would be perverse and would have sex with an ape, there is no result because the figures of the chromosomes are not the same. So if we have mixed creatures, it's a result of genetical design. And in old Egypt, nobody had genetical design. So what is the consequence? Okay, you always find proofs for extraterrestrials. And this continues. Egypt is full of these mysteries, and practically there's nothing about it in the literature. I guess everyone knows here what cargo cult is. Yeah? Cargo cult. When a technological high society comes together with a technological low society, the technological low society does not understand the technology of the high society. For example, the high society has electric light. They have a beamer. They have a gun. But the natives had no idea what that is, how it functions. They have helicopters, the high society. They have aircrafts. The natives don't understand it. So, and always when a technological high society came together with a technological low society, the low society tries to imitate some of the technology. Also, they don't understand what it is and what it works. They try to imitate it. So there is a new form of cult which is called cargo cult in ethnology. Cargo cult always means technological objects which of course don't function, not at all. But they saw something it looked like and they tried to copy it. In Egypt we have this object here. You find this object in all kinds of forms. You find it small, you find it big, 2 meters big. You find it on sarcophaguses, you find it on columns, always this object. In official archaeology, this is called a jet pillar. But what is a jet pillar? Here again, a jet pillar between whatever the six like. I read in the archaeological textbooks all kinds of explanations. Was ist eine Ähre? corn, the wheat, all kinds of form. Even in one of the textbooks I read, it is an object of the god of Ptah, and then I read, it is a penis. My God, such a penis I would not have. So no one knows in reality what a jet pillar is. And jet pillars exist all over Egypt. I think it was cargo code. It was misunderstood technology. Look at here, the jet pillar on the head here, isn't it incredible? So, mach weiter. So, we come to the point. This is Abydos. Abydos is on the Nile like most of the temple. This temple here was created by Sethos the First. It was about 1300 BC. When you are a tourist in Egypt, don't miss Abydos. The walls in Abydos still today have wonderful colored relief. Fantastic. And then in Abydos you find one of the walls with a gigantic jet pillar. The goddess Isis is giving the jet pillar to the pharaoh as a gift. It must have been something important and something big. Otherwise the goddess Isis would not give it to the pharaoh. And then when you are in Abydos, just go out of the temple, and behind the temple you find a hole in the ground. And in this hole you find these gigantic stone blocks. The place is called Osirion. Why Osirion? The first god of the old Egyptian name was Osiris. And Osiris had a brother, his name was Seth. And Seth did not like his brother Osirion, because the humans loved Osirion, but did not love him, Seth. So there was a fight, and Seth killed his brother Osiris. Osiris, yes. Killed him. Now, and his bones were beneath the earth on 7 places, somewhere in Egypt. But the head of Osiris was buried here. That's why they call it Osirion. Now look at these stone blocks and at the chiseling here. There is in everything evolution in technology. Our forefathers some thousands of years ago, they started very primitive. First they had a spear. They realized with a piece of spear they could have the animals on distance. Then they invented the bow and arrow. Later they realized that there are stones which are harder, stones which are softer. They realized how could they cut the stones slowly, smoothly, etc. They realized how could they put the stones together, how could they transport it. It's all an evolution of technology. It starts always very primitive before you are in a position to make these things. You see, this is technology. We are here in Abydos. That's around 400 kilometers away from Aswan. The blocks here are again granite from Aswan. The Nile is just behind the hill. Now, whoever did this must have had the technology to transport these blocks. He must have had the plans, the engineering knowledge to put all this together. And to the cranes to set one next to the other. Now you see, here is the temple of Sethos. This Osirion is deeper than the temple of Sethos. The temple of Sethos was built on that stone blocks, because this continues here. Which means this part, these gigantic stones are older than the temple of Sethos. But as you can realize, the temple of Sethos, they just used small stones. Small stone blocks one next to the other. So the evolution of technology is here upside down. It should be the other way around. The small stone blocks should be the oldest one, should be down. And later they learned how to move and to transport gigantic blocks, so they put them on. But it's the opposite. Something with the evolution of technology is completely wrong here. And this continues. Also on the Nile, most of the temple on the Nile, is Dendera. Is Dendera. Now, what do you see here? The ceiling of Dendera. Dendera is relatively young. is about 300 BC. But we have always learned that the pharaohs believed that the sun goes up in the east, goes and turns over the Nile in the west. In reality, the gods had their ships between the stars. And in Dendera, this temple, which I said is only about 300 BC, this temple is standing on an older platform. On this platform were already earlier 2 other temples. So the platform down is much older than the temple itself. And as tourists now, by the way, grace to my books, you can go into a hole in the ground under the temple. You just climb in there. The hole is not bigger than as the entry for a dock. You see, the man has to bend his neck here. You arrive into a room which is very small, about 1 meter large, but full of hieroglyphs on both sides. You see, it's not large. And this is underground, the temple of Dendera. And what do we find there again? The jet pillar. And the jet pillar is holding something strange. In archaeology, they say this is the womb of the universe which holds the seed of Osiris. But I'm sorry, you know, the seed and the sperm, these ancient peoples could never have seen it. They had no microscopes, nothing like this. So forget it. It looks rather technologically. There's an ape with 2 knives, symbolizing the danger. Maybe it was something completely different, something technical, something electrically, which was lighting. You see here something like a lamp. Energy comes through from here. The jet pillar as an isolator. And we have tried to make it function. In Egypt, and not only in Egypt, also in Babylon, several so-called batteries were found. In the beginning, when they were found, they believed that these are just was in bloemenvazen. Wer weiß, so etwas blöds. Oh God, why is that? Huh? No, for the flowers, where you put the flowers in. Vases. So, macht vertreten. So. Then they realized that there are different metals. It's a piece of copper and a piece of iron. So this iron pillow you put into this copper here and all together into this vase. And then they found on the bottom liquid of acid, like vinegar of lemon or vinegar of wine. Soon as you have this together, 2 different metals, iron, copper, and liquid, you have electrical battery. The principle of galvanic. It works like this, chemistry. Of course, we tried it. And it works. Just by doing the 2 different metals, the liquid, acid, and you receive 2.5 volts. So maybe all this was technology, and not as we believe. Now, the mystery is continuing there. In Saqqara is a grave which was discovered in 1954. And they found writings on there, and they really knew who it was. The pharaoh's name was Sekhemkhet. Now Sekhemkhet is the 3rd dynasty. Cheops, the constructor of the Great Pyramid, is the 4th dynasty. So this grave was older than Cheops. Again, the walls were cut out of it. They arrived before a door. The door was closed. It was a stone door, was closed, and there was a seal on it. An unbroken seal. Now the archaeologists were absolutely sure the seal is unbroken. We have the name Sekhemkhet, so we will find the oldest mummy, older than Cheops, in this tomb. It was July 1954 when archaeologists went down there, and in a little hole they found a sarcophagus. Now, normal sarcophaguses you have seen before, they are cut out of granite. And they have a lid. You can take the lid away. This sarcophagus was 1 block made out of alabaster. 1 block of alabaster. And there was no lid up there. It was a gliding door. The door was closed. And there was again 2 seals on both sides, unbroken seals. And on the top of the sarcophagus is here, they found the rests of flowers. So somebody must have given to the dead a bunch of flower. Then they put the mummy in there, they closed the gliding door, they put 2 seals on it. Thousands and thousands of years later, we find this gigantic sarcophagus. When it was found, Zachariah Goni, he immediately put a piece of wood on it so that this dust of the flowers would not flow away. And slowly, slowly, piece by piece, the gliding door was opened. And the sarcophagus was completely empty. Now, how does this function? The door is closed, the seal is unbroken. Here, 2 unbroken seals. The gliding door is down. A bunch of flower to say goodbye. And thousands of years later, as we can, empty. Absolutely nothing. We have no explanation for this miracle here. By the way, the archaeologist, Dr. Gonein, he was so disappointed that there was nothing inside. He went inside the sarcophagus with his little light. And the students say he was loved by all the students. He was a brilliant man. He was very humorous. He could make jokes, etc. When he came out of the sarcophagus again, he had eyes. He could not look to anyone anymore. 2 days later, he jumped over a bridge in Cairo into the Nile. He killed himself. Now his follower, another archaeologist, went also with his body inside. And the same thing happened. 2 days later, he killed himself with pills. Now then, the Department of Antiquity decided to close this whole thing. Never let somebody in. I was the last one who was in there, who made these photos. Of course, people ask me sometime, have you been crawling in there? No. No. I would not stand here. So there are a lot of mysteries. And the mysteries continue. Everyone knows the Great Pyramid, and nobody knows how it was constructed. I had this in my last speech. Just the usual idea is the ramp. But the ramp must have a length of 4 kilometers because the Nile, the distance to the pyramid is 4 kilometers. Now the pyramid grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and the ramp grows. Finally, the ramp has more volume, stones, as the pyramid itself. It doesn't change nothing if you construct a ramp around the pyramid. The ramp around still has more stones, more volumes as the pyramid itself. Now there are different explanations how this pyramid was constructed. And every explanation is reasonable. They make all sense. I mean, engineers are trying to explain which way they did it, and all is wonderful. But don't forget one thing. Evolution of technology. Cheops' father, Snorfu, is a Stone Age man. So where in evolution of technology did they learn all these things? With the ropes and the ramps and the polishing and the planning. Before you start to construct the pyramid, you have a planning, engineering planning. Where are the shafts? Where are the galleries? Where are the rooms? This means engineering planning. It is not fit, evolution of technology, into the time of Cheops. Theoretically, this is all possible. You can do it. But where does the knowledge come from? Now, as you said before, the oldest god of Egypt was Osiris. His wife was Isis. And in the meantime, there are different shafts in the Great Pyramid. And these shafts point exactly on one side to Orion, and on the other side to Sirius, or Osiris. And the star of Orion is the same, also in hieroglyphic writings. Osiris is Orion, and Isis is Sirius. So they were pointed in that direction. We know our solar system. We know around the sun we have so-called inner planets. The inner planets are Mercury, Venus, and then we, the Earth. Then comes the outer planets, seen from us in direction to the sun. Sun, Mars, asteroid belt, Jupiter, and so on. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are 3 rooms. And you will just see the distance between one room and the other is not the same. The distance is the same as the distance of our 3 inner planets. But the old Egyptians could never have known something of Mercury. Expect somebody told them why this is. The pyramid is just not by coincidence somewhere. The distance to the North Pole is the same as the distance to the center of the Earth. That means they must have known about the measurements of the Earth. These are only a few of the mysteries. Now, our archaeology says that this pyramid was constructed by Cheops. Cheops was 4th dynasty, about 2400 BC, from now on about 4500. But there is not one single proof for Cheops. Where did the name Cheops come from? And is there a statue? There are statues of Sekhemkhet, there are statues of all kinds of pharaohs. Statues of Cheops? None. Is there a mummy? Is there anything of Cheops? No. Why did the name come from? Some 2,000 years and a little more, our clever historians from the Western Wall were all in Egypt. I know them all, Diodor, Strabon, Plutarch. They were all in Egypt. And they all asked the priest, who built this gigantic pyramid? And they all said, we don't know. So where is the name Cheops come from? One of the historians' name, I mention him again, Herodotus, about 430 BC. He was there, and Herodotus has written 2 books about Egypt. And in volume 2, he makes clear differences between what he sees with his eyes, what he smells with his nose, what he steps with his feet, and what somebody told him. He makes clear differences between it. And he said, somebody told me a tyrant with the name of Cheops, the Greek name is Khufu, constructed the Great Pyramid with the help of 100,000 slaves in 20 years. So the archaeologists had now the name Khufu Cheops. So they used the name Khufu Cheops. All true, all the other historians say the contrary. Diodor of Sicily, that was about 100 AD, he knew all the books of the predecessors of Strabon, Plutarch, etc. And he says, Herodot is completely wrong. My colleague Herodot is completely wrong when he says Cheops did it. The old Egyptian priest said, no, it was not Cheops. It was done before the Great Flood. Done before the Great Flood? How is this possible? There are Arabian historians which nobody known in the West. Nobody even mentions them. Ibrahim Abdul al-Masudi, al-Makrizi, wonderful, brilliant man. Al-Makrizi in his book Hittat says, the Great Pyramid was constructed before the Great Flood by a pharaoh with the name of Saurit. And then he precisely says, Saurit is the same which the Hebrew society calls Enoch. Now about Enoch I was referring 2 days ago. Enoch was a human. Enoch was the first man who disappeared in a fiery chariot. Enoch was the 7th patriarch before the Great Flood. We know the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch is written in the first person. Enoch explains exactly what happened in his time. He was taken up to a mother spaceship. Of course, he says not mother spaceship. She says city around the earth. He learns the languages of the extraterrestrial. They teach him in every detail. I remember one of the teachers says to Herodot, son of man or son of human, look out there the window. Do you see this little light there? You humans, you call the light moon. But the moon has no light by itself. The moon receives its light from the sun. And then he explains the different phases. So why is it full moon, half moon, quarter moon, etc. The extraterrestrial says to Enoch, see this bright shining light? You humans, you call it sun. Now look at all the other lights there. Different lights in distances, different shapes, bigger, smaller, a little different color, brighter, red, blue, etc. These are all suns. And he explains Enoch astronomy. He explains Enoch that the calendar, that our earth surrounds around the sun in 365 days plus. What plus? We have all 4 year a leap year. In the book of Enoch, we speak about leap hours, much more precise. And this in prehistoric time, before the Great Flood. Enoch was the 7th patriarch before the Great Flood. Before Enoch disappeared from the earth in a fiery chariot with the extraterrestrials, he asked the boss, may I go down to earth to say goodbye to all my natives, my family? He had 4 wives and different children. And they say, yes, we bring you down to say goodbye. Enoch's oldest son is Methuselah, the one which we know from the Bible. Before Enoch disappears, he gives Methuselah 99 books and says him, here, my son Methuselah, are written the books by your father's hand. Keep them carefully for the generations after the great flood. All this was done before the great flood. Where are the books of Enoch? We only have one, the Ethiopian one. What are the other 99s? Now, this Arabian historians say the Great Pyramid was constructed before the Great Flood. So there should be traces of water. When you as a tourist go around the pyramid, you always find traces of water. This is not natural eruption, and every geologist knows it. And you can easily prove it. This is the so-called fourth pyramid, which is never shown to tourists. And these are the traces of water. There were water. This was inside the water. So the old Egyptians said it was created before the great flood. So why then does the Great Pyramid don't have these traces of water? Because the Great Pyramid was covered with plates. The plates protected the Great Pyramid. Later, in the year 823, Al-Mamun took the plates away because they wanted to go inside the pyramid. Now this is funny. Inside the Great Pyramid, we have this, we call it the Great Gallery. This is 8.5 meters long and 47 meters long. And you look, the technology is fantastic. Made, according to archaeology, by Cheops, 4th dynasty. But Cheops had a father. His father's name was Snorfu, a Stone Age man. This is the pyramid of Snorfu. When you look at it, you have the impression this pyramid was standing into the water. It looks like garbage, all destroyed. And you say, well, in such a mist, it is impossible that inside there are still chambers. And we go inside. These are all traces of water. And inside, what do we find? The Great Gallery, with gigantic stone blocks of 70 tons, one next to the other, made by Snorfu, but Snorfu is the father of Cheops. So he is older than Cheops. What about the technology, the evolution of technology? Something is completely wrong here. Again, the Great Gallery of the Cheops pyramid, and go back to Snorfu. That's Snorfu, it's not Cheops. That's the father of Cheops. He did it already. With what knowledge? We do something wrong here in our history. In old Egypt, there are pharaohs in the literature. For example, Herodotus. He says not only the priest showed him 241 statues, he also said out of a book they read to him the names of 325 pharaohs with their names and their dates. 325, absolutely impossible. Egyptology, the history of Egyptology officially starts about 3000 BC. Now he's talking about 11,341 years. About Manetho, historian, he speaks about 90 pharaohs. Absolutely impossible. It does not fit into Egyptology. Something is wrong. Maybe we forgot something in here. Now we always say extraterrestrials, they can of course never come to Earth because the distances between the stars are too big. You measure this in light years, and nobody can travel light years except if you have the speed of light. So it makes no sense. UFOs do not exist because they cannot come here. They would take their whole life to come here. And that's all not true again. You don't need the speed of light. You don't need the overspeed of light. Even with primitive technology, you can reach the distances. I just give you an example. Look, you Americans, you know this, the space shuttle. Now, with every space shuttle, you have a heavy load of about 30 tons. It's always a question of money. Money, again, is a question of politics. Does a president want to make space travel or not? You need Kennedy, wanted to make space travel. His follower Johnson didn't want to make. It's all like this. So, for the moment, the Americans have no space shuttle in functions. That's why the Americans work together with the Russians. It's all a question of money. If you would spend a lot of money, then the Americans would maybe have 20 or 30 space shuttles. There was a time when you had 3. If you have 30 space shuttles, you don't start every 3-4 months. You start every week. That means every week, 30 tons of prefabricated stuff into an orbit between the moon and the Earth. This prefabricated material is put together to a gigantic ring. It has to be a ring. Because as soon as the ring is finished, you turn the ring around its own axis. By doing so, you create centrifugal force. Centrifugal force works like an artificial gravity. You have a bottom under your feet. You don't swim around. Then you need of course, some sort of propulsion. Not liquid propulsion as we have it, that's too primitive. But in the scientific literature, we learn a lot of propulsion of tomorrow. These are complete different electric or photon propulsion. Then slowly you start this thing here, slowly. Maybe it takes 100 years, it doesn't matter, until this object has only 2% of the speed of light. 2% of the speed of light. With 2% of the speed of light, you would reach the distance of 10 light years within 500 Earth years. Now you may say, come on, this is nonsense. No one survived 500 Earth years. You don't have to survive 500 Earth years. Imagine, this is a generation spaceship. On board, you live and love, you make children, you die. It's not annoying. You have wonderful American restaurants, steak, Swiss cheese fondues, TV series, whatever. It's okay, it's wonderful. Now, during a 500-year-old trip, the astronomers on board, they will, of course, carefully look what suns have planets. And it must be planets which are similar to our planet, not too hot, not too cold. Until about 1 year ago, we always learned that our planet in our Milky Way has a unique chance. We are not too hot, not too cold, we have water. We are something special. In the meantime, they have detected more than 3,000 exoplanets. Some of them are like the Earth. Now, due to the Hubble telescope, NASA made a press conference a few months ago, and they said, now we calculate, high calculation, only in our Milky Way with 4.5 billion Earth-like planets. We are not unique anymore. They will find out this on their 500-year trip. They will find out which sun has planets which is not too hot and too cold. So the mother spaceship, the generation spaceship, goes in an orbit. The generation ship itself never makes a landing. It was composited by prefabricated material in an orbit. If it would make a landing, it would break off completely. Only smaller vehicles are sent down now to the newly found planet. Smaller vehicles. Well, in the Bible, Ezekiel calls it the splendorness of the highest. The old Egyptian called it the winged sun disk. The old Indians called it the Vimana. All these objects which were coming from a mother spaceship. The same thing happened here. They sent down smaller spaceships. We will call it today space shuttle. Now they give to the crew 500 years to create an industrial society. We all live in an industrial society. Since when do we have an industrial society? 180 years, 200 years? But the industrial society which we have is the product of a long evolution. Our forefathers, grandfathers, grandfathers, they all had since thousands of years to find out things. For example, electricity. You just don't have like this. Different metals, steel. It's all a question of a technological evolution. It takes a long time until we have our industrial society. They don't need these thousands of years of evolution. They have the results in their computer. So you give them 500 years. They have industries now. And now they are able to construct a second spaceship like this. And now it becomes interesting. There was once a spaceship started from the Earth and was 500 years on the way. After another 500 years, you have two, the old and the new one. Each one is traveling 500 years. Then you have 4, 8, 16. Now a snowball effect starts to be. Only with the speed of 2% of the speed of light, we would colonize our whole Milky Way, the whole Milky Way, in 10 millions of years, starting from one point. And the only thing we had to do is to create or to build one generation spaceship. All the rest happened itself. Now, 10 millions of years, you think that's still a long time. It's just 1% of the age of our Milky Way. And now we make this calculation with 2% of the speed of light. If we accept 5% of the speed of light, or 7, you don't take 10 millions of years, you make it shorter. So the scientific idea that you cannot travel, nobody can visit us, is simply not true. Even without high technology over speed of light, that's another discussion. Of course, I think we have other possibilities to travel between the stars. I simply want to make clear, even with the primitive technology, we could do it. But now I said before, these extraterrestrials, they had sex with our forefathers. In the book of Enoch, he clearly says, the so-called fallen angels, that's a question of tradition, fallen angels, they had sex, huh? Translation, yeah. They had sex with the humans. In other books also, they had sex with humans, and the result were giants. Now a normal being thinks, now this is all too much now. Sex with humans? I mean, intelligent life out there has a complete different evolution than we. We have been created like us because we have our evolution. But on other planets, maybe there are intelligent beings of life who look like flying elephants. Maybe they have tentacles and so on. Why? It would never work, sex with human. You know, the sexual apparatus, the penis and the vagina would never function together. So this is all garbage that extraterrestrials had sex with humans. It's not garbage. It's not coincidence. There is a theory from the Swedish Nobel Prize winner Svante Arrhenius. This man died 70 years ago. This theory is called panspermia. What is panspermia? It starts by saying somewhere in our Milky Way the first intelligent form of life developed. Now you can say as a critic, stop. How did it start there? We have learned in school that our universe started with the Big Bang. Ask the question, what was before the Big Bang? How did the Big Bang start? In religion, in philosophy, we learn in the beginning there was God, and God was the Word. Ask the question, where does God come from? Just saying it happened, that's not an answer, not the scientific answer. What is it then? Now we say somewhere in the Milky Way, the first intelligent life or form evolved. How? Give me a piece of paper, and I make with the compass a perfect circle. And then I give you this piece of paper, and it goes from one hand to the other, and you answer me the question, where did the circle start? Your logic says, Eric must have started somewhere, but you cannot answer that question. The circle is closed, empty. So here we have to say, we don't know how it started, but somewhere in the Milky Way, the first intelligent form of life started. This first intelligent form of life had an interest to spread out their own form of life in a certain part of the Milky Way. To do this, you do not need spaceships, not at all in the beginning. You simply infect a sector of your Milky Way with billions and billions of DNA. By making this, only this, now from my skin, a few 10,000 cells are away. In each and every cell, the DNA. In every DNA, the complete plan for the building of your body, your callus, your hair, your eyes, including all the ones of your forefathers. It's all in the DNA. So you infect a certain section of your Milky Way with DNA. By doing so, you know from the beginning that the biggest part, it's like dust, will come into the gravity of a sun, will burn, or will come into the gravity of a big planet like Jupiter. So there are no Voraussetzungen now to start predictions, for life. But the small part of it will land on a similar planet as the one which started with that. And you just heard the figure from NASA, only in our Milky Way we have to calculate about 4.5 billions of Earth-like systems. And now life starts. I have learned in my high school that life started all in the beginning with this primordial soup. Is that the word? Primordial soup, what a word. Primordial soup. So the atoms have melt together with other atoms, and then they form the first molecules, and then the chains of molecules, etc. And then throughout billions and millions of years, it's just coincidence, one coincidence next to the other, and finally we are the product of evolution. The modern science, for example, Sir Francis Crick, Nobel Prize winner, or Professor Dr. Chandra Wickramasinghe, astrophysician, has 3 doctorates, that's all wrong. That the work, it never worked with the primordial soup. The information for life has come from outside. And only after this information has come here, evolution starts. So we are the product of evolution. But the starting point for our evolution has come from outside. And this fits again with the holy literature. The gods or God created humans according to their own image. We are the offspring of others. But how can this be when the starting point comes from out and we are evolution? I mean, on our planet we have thousands of animals which are completely different from us. And all product of evolution, they say. I read somewhere, only on this planet we have 1,000 sorts of spiders. 1,000 sorts of spiders. This is crazy. All the animals, the crocodiles, is completely different to us. 1,000, all the product of evolution, simply because evolution has so-called unchangeable forms. You know, what is an unchangeable form? Every animal, every human, during a certain span of our life, we have a sexual desire. And you can do nothing against the sexual desire. There's an unchangeable form. Or each and every one here, in your brain, including me, we all hold a beast in our brain. You can do nothing against this beast. The name of the beast is curiosity. Do something against curiosity. Imagine dolphins would be very intelligent forms of animals, and dolphins are intelligent forms of animal. Now the dolphins jump by night out of the water, and they see little lights up there, our stars. They realize that they have different colors and distances, and the dolphins swim together in a scientific dolphin conference. And the chief scientist says, I need much more information. We have to find out more. So they jump out of the water for I don't know how many thousands of years. And then they have another scientific dolphin conference. And now the chief asks, well, all these lights up there, are they maybe suns, like we have a sun here? They have learned that the earth turns around. Are there maybe planets? Are there maybe other planets with water like us? Are there other dolphins out there? But someday they wanted to know it, not just to speculate, to know it, scientifically fact, to know it. If these are solar systems and planets, they have first to construct an antenna. But to construct an antenna, they have to melt iron, for example, iron. To melt iron, they have to make fire. To make fire, they have to get out of the water. Unchangeable forms. It always works like this. You will never, an animal who grows up in the water here, will never invent a computer. It doesn't function with water together. You can have different forms of crocodiles, but with crocodile fingers or pads, you cannot invent a computer. These are unchangeable forms. And that's exactly what the Holy Book said. God, or the gods in plural, created humans according to their own image. Later, so evolution grows up. Later, they really have come here with spaceships. And that was not the coincidence. I am often accused by citizens which say, but Eric, you say extraterrestrials were here. But what do you think here? There are billions and billions of stars out there. Why should these extraterrestrials have chosen exactly the Earth? And why exactly at that time in evolution, which is now, or 20,000 years? Why? This is all not fitting. It was not coincidence. Imagine we humans would be able to make space travel very easy. So our scientists will sit together and ask, okay, to which planets do we go? We start in our solar system. And they have a conference. Should we go to Mercury? No, Mercury, come on, it's much too hot, too close to the sun. We can do nothing on Mercury. Should we go to Venus? The surface temperature of Venus is still 500 degrees. So the third planet is Earth. We live here. We can go to the moon, we can go to Mars, we can go to the asteroid belt. But we have to take our own oxygen with us. This is possible. Far away, the next planet, Jupiter. We never go to Jupiter. Jupiter is a giant of a planet. The gravity would just kill us. And far away, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, planets of ice. So we chose before, where do we want to land? Because there where we land, we have to survive. We have to work on the place where we land. The same system happened for the extraterrestrials. They make their analysis in astronomy before. They know exactly on which solar system panspermia, the DNA, worked to an evolution. It's not coincidence. And they came here, and they realized evolution worked. There are primitive forms of life, but one form of life is the most advanced, our ape forefather. Now they change the DNA code in the ape, which is easy to make. You simply take one cell and you change the basic in the DNA. You put it in a liquid of nourishment. The liquid of nourishment grows into a cell, put it into the womb of a female of the same species. After a few months, the female will give birth to a child. The child has, of course, the skeleton, the bone. The child is a part of evolution. We came from the apes, seen from this point of view. But because of the artificial mutation, we have something in plus which the rest of the family tree has not. For example, we can think, we can think, we can plan for the future, we can speak, etc. And this goes on. Now the humans or the pre-humans mix again with some apes, it happened. Then they make another artificial mutation. This you can prove. Look, there was in the 50 years, they found on the Dead Sea many scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls. One of the Dead Sea Scrolls was called the Lamech Scroll. Who was Lamech? Lamech was a rich shepherd. He had obviously hundreds of thousands of animals, sheep and whatever. And one day Lamech comes back to his home tents, and his wife Batenosh had given birth to a child. And Father Lamech said to his wife Batenosh, "This is impossible, this cannot be my child. I was away too long, you know, you need certain months." I was alone, and this boy looks completely different than the other children that I have. And now Batenosh, his wife, swears, "Oh dear Father Lamech, I swear you no one touched me sexually." And she even said, "Not another shepherd, not a soldier, no one touched me sexually." But here is the boy. What can Lamech do? So he loves his wife, and he goes to his own father to ask him for advice. His father was Methuselah. He tells Methuselah the story. What happened? There's a new boy at home, which can't be my boy. Methuselah goes to his own father, so the grandfather of Lamech, and tells him the story. And who was that grandfather? Enoch. Enoch says to his son Methuselah, "Go to your son Lamech, make him clear that the guardians of the sky have inseminated the seed of Batenosh without touching her sexually. Give him the name of Noah, because we, the guardians of the sky, have decided to destroy mankind except the new generation. Now we all are children of Noah. We all are descendants of Noah. That means we have a natural evolution. We are part of natural evolution, the bones, the skeleton, etc. At the same time, we have extraterrestrial DNA in us already. That's the reason why we wish to have contact with them, to go out there. We have a desire to come back to our family. So we are the product of evolution, but not only the product of evolution. And it all fits together. Now this is a UFO conference, and sometimes I receive strange, secret videos, discs, and one man, he was a pilot, sent me one of these discs, And he said, Mr. von Däniken, I will be happy, show it to the public. I cannot stand behind, I cannot help you, but I made this video. I took it over the airport Hernandez near Aguadillo. Aguadillo is in Puerto Rico, here in the Caribbean Sea. And it was taken on April 26, 2013 at 1:22 p.m. Now you cannot falsificate this because of the data. The data change all the time. The speed, the height, the exact geographical condition. You see the UFO here? It's flying over hills and fields. Then comes the Hernando Airport, Hernando Aguadillo in Puerto Rico. Then comes a sea, port, a seaport, harbor. The UFO always changes its shape, bigger, smaller. Then it falls or jumps into the water. And shortly out of the water, 2 UFOs come out. And because of the data here, which change every second, you cannot falsificate it. All these data are part of the camera. The exact geographical decision, the time of the 10th of the second, the place always automatically show the frame. We, now are 2. We have nothing on earth of this technology. So somebody is here and somebody is watching us. And even if I never found an extraterrestrial object, I mean a technological object, which I proudly would present to the scientific community, you are able to prove that extraterrestrials were here. I mean, somebody in the past made mixed creatures. You need genetical design for it. And we did not have it. And one of our forefathers' name is Abraham. Also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a scroll found, the Abraham Apocryphic. And there Abraham says he was sitting outside one evening when he heard the noise from heaven. And he was shocked up a little, and then 2 beings in glittering clothes came near to him. They speak his language. By the way, why do extraterrestrials speak the language of the humans? In the case of Ezekiel, the man up there in the so-called temple says to Ezekiel, oh, humans, you have eyes to see, you see nothing. You have ears to hear, and you hear nothing. Why do they know our language? Our ethnologists, 100 years ago, they go to the upper Amazon River, and they come together with culture which have completely different languages than us. Or in the upper Nile in Africa. None of these natural cultures speaks English or German or Spanish or French. It was always the ethnologists who learned the language in a short time. With the technology of extraterrestrials, with their computer, intelligent design, they can analyze our language within a few days. So for me, it was never a problem why extraterrestrials should speak the language of the tribes they contact. Now the one here descends and speaks to Abraham and says to Abraham, we will bring you up to the heaven if you wish, the so-called heaven, question of translation. Abraham is proud. He describes that they go up. He flies over the earth. And when he's up there, he says, but I wish to fall downwards to the earth. When somebody wishes to fall downwards, so he must be up. And then he clearly says, the high place on which we stood, it turned always up and down. Of a sudden, I saw the earth up and I saw the stars down. When you are in a generation spaceship around the orbit, this generation spaceship will always turn around its own axis. There is no other way, because by turning around itself, it creates this centrifugal force, artificial gravity. But no one in Stone Age, like Abraham's time, could have known this. I said before, if you have the speed of only 2% of the speed of light, you would travel the distances of 10 light years in 500 years. After a 500-year trip, you need energy. We don't know what energy, might be raw material, any kind of stuff, maybe uranium, whatever. Where do you look for energy? Not on the planets where the humans live. You will not destroy them, make them upset. But energy you found in the asteroid belt. Since 3 years, there is from your American probe, NASA probe, going to Ceres. Ceres is in the asteroid belt, is the biggest asteroid, has a diameter of 950 kilometers. And we have wonderful pictures from Ceres now, in the meantime. And there we find strange things in Ceres. Some dots which are brighter than the rest of it, and there is at the moment no natural explanation. They always look for it. And it becomes even crazier. The NASA probe photographed a mountain which is not near to this crater. It's on another place. And you will see the mountain has stripes, black and white. Somebody's crushed raw material from the mountain. Somebody, there is no life up there, nothing. Some extraterrestrial probe, extraterrestrial beings took some raw material. And the newest pictures show a rectangular, artificial place on the surface. You see it here? You see this here? You see this line here? This is artificially made, including this. Here. So you can find proof that extraterrestrials were here some thousands of years ago, even if at the moment you have no direct proof, you have nothing in your hands. But you prove it outside, you prove it by indications, DNA, mixed creatures, and all this. And by all them, the extraterrestrials did left some technical objects here. But they are held by religions. You all remember the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark of the Covenant was an extraterrestrial object. And Solomon took the Ark of the Covenant and put it in the temple, in the holiest places of the temple. Then his son, Menelechem, from Ethiopia, came and stole the Ark of the Covenant. Since thousands of years, the Ark of the Covenant is under the cathedral of the Holy Virgin Mary in the city of Aksum in Ethiopia. A few months ago, the high priest, so to say the Pope of the Coptic Church, gave an interview to a German newspaper. And the German journalist asked, what about the Ark of the Covenant? Is it true you have it in your country under the cathedral of the Virgin Mary in the city of Aksum? And he said, yes, it is true. I saw it, and it is not made by humans. So we have some artifacts. Just religion provides that we cannot go close by. We will find, huh? Protect. Die Pyramidenanimation haben wir nicht nachstellen können. So. As I said, in Egypt, they found in the past years more and more shafts and rooms. I showed some of them in my speech 3 days ago. More and more shafts and rooms. And we found it electronically. We know exactly. There are shafts, they guide into a room. So we can ask ourselves, so why don't we go there? When we know the situation. The shafts are so small, they have a side length of about 14 to 15 centimeters. You cannot climb in there. The ones who constructed the pyramid, the planning with all these shafts, they knew exactly only a high society is able to go into the pyramid. Some others cannot. You would destroy the whole pyramid from up to down. They knew exactly what we're doing. Now, Enoch left his book to his son Methuselah, and I expect practically every month that now we find, as predicted by Edgar Cayce, rooms with books inside. The problem is just our politics. The politics on this planet, that's the one absolute shit that exists here. You see, according to old Egyptian traditions, the constructor of the pyramid was Saurit. But Saurit is the same which the Hebrew community called Enoch. Now, the whole Arabian world is proud of the temples in Egypt and of course of the Great Pyramid. We Arabs, our forefather, we did these gigantic monuments. And now it comes up that Enoch, I'm sorry, Enoch was a Jew, would have helped to construct the pyramid. Politically, it is impossible. They would never agree and say, oh yes, it was Enoch. So the situation has to change. And we are working on it, that situation changes. I'm, ladies and gentlemen, in the meantime, I am 81 years old. Next week is my next birthday. And I'm happy now. And I have the impression the gods love me. I'm still writing books. I have in the meantime 40 books, and I am continuing to write books. And I am proud that I am happy to be here. I must say thank you to Julia and Nancy and their team for the fantastic organization of this conference, and also that they had the courage to invite me to speak to you. And of course, it's a desire to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. You all have come here because you are individuals and you think differently than the rest of it. They all tell us things which are stupid and not true, and we know it. It's stupid and not true. You are the ones who bring out the message slowly to the public. I always ask myself, also in Europe, why at the hell is the big press, the media, like the big newspapers? Here in the United States you have a Time magazine. In Germany we have a magazine called Der Spiegel, the same thing as Time magazine. Why do they never come with something up which is true, a UFO case which we definitely can prove? Why never? What happened? It's simply because our society functions the way. Every newspaper, every magazine, every TV station has an owner. It doesn't matter who the owner is. Can be the state, can be a political party, can be a rich family. And all these owners, they want to be serious. They want not to be ridiculed. Now, soon as a journalist would bring a brilliant article concerning UFO and proves it, then the owners and the society say, this is not serious. So the people will not buy our magazine anymore because it's unserious. That's why it functions. You know, we are educated in this planet, two sorts of human beings. One sort is religion. It doesn't matter what kind of religion. The other sort is scientific. The scientific group believes that the religious group believes God made everything. God made the universe, the planets, the plants, the trees, etc. But as crown of creation, God made us, the humans. And the scientific community is absolutely sure, now it's the other way around, it was all evolution, but we are the top of evolution. Have you ever, ladies and gentlemen, realized that in both cases, religion, we are the crown of creation. Evolution, science, we are the top of evolution. In both cases, we are the greatest. Something like us does not exist out there anymore. We are the greatest. We do not want extraterrestrial. We will deny it. It's a psychological problem which we have in the society. It's not, extraterrestrials are not serious. That's why we have to fight and fight until the bigger part of the society starts to think like we think, and we will win. And I personally am absolutely sure this planet is already under observation. Again, you show this short UFO film, not only because of this, we have other UFO films which are definitely clear we are under observation. And they will show up sooner or later. Why they don't do it just like this before a big football stadium? There are 80,000 people already. The cameras are there. Why not? They know how we react. The gods created humans according to their own image. They know in what panic we fall, how crazy we are. So they want to protect us. They want to make it slowly, step by step, before we have the shock of the gods. But the time that they show in public more and more is definitely coming. I have no doubts about this. You, ladies and gentlemen, have come here. You have listened to this controversial Swiss more than 2 hours, and I am proud that I was a speaker here in this wonderful organization. I hope one day we see us again somewhere on this planet, and I hope that until next time, the extraterrestrials have shown up. Thank you for your understanding.
Wenn Ihnen dieses Video gefallen hat, geben Sie gern einen Daumen nach oben, teilen Sie das Video und schreiben Sie einen Kommentar. Bleiben Sie neugierig.